Have you ever heard of a game that's premise sounded really weird, odd, or just overall goofy but ended up being really successful as soon as it came out? Or how about a game that had to be made in very little time but nevertheless ended up being very well made and very popular? Perhaps you've seen a game become really popular recently but were shocked to discover that it came out many years ago and was relatively unheard of then. Well, today I'm going to be talking about 5 unexpectedly successful video games. Did you ever want a game that has loads of extremely short minigames and a cast of wacky characters, each with their own genre of minigames? No. Well, too bad, because that's what WarioWare Inc. Mega Party Games is all about. This game is all about clearing each character's set of minigames in order to get to their boss minigame, which can be something as cool as clearing a few stages as this little dude with a Wario stash, to something as odd as hammering a nail into a board. Normally a game filled with minigames is fun in its own right, but not only are some of these games super wacky and fun, but some of the sound effects or even the games themselves are hilarious. Take this barber minigame for example. The object is to cut off all of this guy's hair, and judging by his reaction, I'm assuming that isn't what he asked for. What's impressive about WarioWare Inc. Mega Party Games is that even though it's technically a remake of the original WarioWare for the Game Boy Advance, this game was made for the GameCube in only 6 months. Which is pretty amazing since you don't really hear about that many successful games that were made in less than a year. Once again, I am aware that this is a remake, but you have to remember that not only was this the original Game Boy Advance game, but they also added a bunch of multiplayer games that weren't in the original at all. And to accomplish all of that in half a year is pretty awesome. And although the minigames are the main draw of WarioWare, I also like a lot of the characters in the game. You have this weird cat-dog taxi driving team, a scientist with one bionic eye and footsie pajamas, and this weird girl who apparently has a thing for Wario?
Wow! Wow! Beautiful!
Nowadays, sports games can come in many different varieties, whether it's creative, goofy, serious, or serious but somehow still ends up being goofy. But if you take a look at the sports games back in the early days of video gaming, you'll find that it wasn't too fun or exciting to play, or at the very least, the fun didn't last too long. Heck, I had both Major League Baseball and golf for the NES, and I know for sure that I played both, but I can honestly say that I don't remember having much fun with either one. But what I do remember having fun with, and still have fun playing every once in a while, is Punch-Out! While we all know that Punch-Out was a huge success after it was released back in 1987, back when it was being made they weren't exactly sure how it would do, especially in the US. Punch-Out is an arcade game made by Genyo Takeda and was generally well received in both the US and Japan. However, they wanted to make a port of Punch-Out to the NES due to the console's growing popularity. And in September 1987, Punch-Out Gold Edition was born. However, sometime before this, Nintendo's president at the time, Minoru Arakawa, went and watched a boxing match, and one of the boxers in the ring was none other than Mike Nibble Your Ear a Little Bit Tyson. Arakawa was so impressed with Tyson's power and speed that he wanted to include him as a special character in the upcoming port of Punch-Out for the US because he thought it would help the game sell better. Nintendo paid the royalties to have Tyson's image and likeness for the next 3 years, which at the time was kind of a huge gamble as they paid the royalties before Mike had actually won the heavyweight title from Trevor Berbick. Not to mention that although the arcade title was popular, when developing the NES version they quickly came to realize that the console wouldn't be able to handle the arcade version's particular graphic style, so they had to resort to changing the size of the player's boxer. Thankfully though, the gamble paid off and Mike Tyson's Punch-Out was extremely well received. So why would I think that a sports game about punching people in the face would be better than any other sports game? I mean, other than the fact that it was a game about punching people in the face. I think the reason I like this game so much is because you really have to pay attention to what your opponent is doing. And some opponents require you to pay attention to their attack and counter, because if you don't, you'll get annihilated. Especially when it comes to fighting Tyson.
Failure.
Okay, I know people are going to be confused / angry / fangry about me putting Super Mario RPG on this list considering that it was one of the more successful games on the NES, but you have to take a couple of things into consideration when it comes to this game. The first is that at the time, RPGs weren't really that popular in America, especially goofy RPGs. The second is that Mario has never been in an RPG before. Heck, he's barely been in any other game genres other than Mario Kart and some educational computer games. So you really can't blame people for being a little skeptical about how this game would turn out. It's about as weird as Bomberman being in a story-driven game that has you investigating worlds and solving mysteries, or Sonic being sent to a medieval world where he's a knight who fights enemies with a sword while trying to save the world. But nobody would have predicted how fun, heartwarming, and just an overall great and comedic game this would be. Besides the fact that I get to play as Mario and beat the crap out of enemies with my hammer, one of my absolute favorite things about this game is just how Mario interacts with the world around him. Since he is a man of few words, he prefers to act out whatever he's trying to convey to people with some extreme body language. Although I think one of my favorite moments of this is when you go back to the house where you first met Gino, the kid insults Mario by telling Gino to go with Mario since he could use all the help he could get. To which Mario responds by trying to punch a kid while being held back by Mallow. This game never fails to crack me up and is one of the many reasons as to why this is one of my favorite games. Not because of the attempted child abuse, that's horrible. Although in this case it was pretty hilarious. If I were to tell you that one of the best games on the Xbox is a game about dealing with people's psychological issues, would you think it sounds fun? No? Well, what if I were to tell you that to solve their mental issues, you literally had to go into their subconscious and fight their inner demons with an array of psychic powers at your disposal? Still not enough? Okay, well how about the fact that you're playing as a boy named Rasputin, a child who has run away from his family in the circus in order to infiltrate a government facility, which is also a summer camp that trains children with psychic abilities. And not only do you have one day to become a full-fledged psychic warrior before your father picks you up, but you also have to solve the mystery of what's happened to the missing campers. Psychonauts is one of those games that you really can't compare to anything else because the idea of the game is so unique and fun. Everything from the game mechanics to every character having their own unique personality was really enjoyable throughout the whole game. But I think my favorite thing about Psychonauts would have to be the game's humor. This game is full of funny dialogue, which I could describe to you, but it would be much more effective to show you some of my favorite moments.
How embarrassing. I can't believe I was hung up for so long over these losers.
I always loved you more?
Ford said that I can use this machine to turn pine needles into delicious taffy.
I said it turns mental cobwebs into Psychonauts.
Just testing your hearing.
But you gotta buy a cobweb duster at the camp store first.
Yeah.
Ah, don't you yeah me.
Man, he's like a little bat.
Bat your head in, punk.
Lily, a deranged madman is building an army of psychic death tanks to take over the world, and there's no one who can stop him, except for you and me.
Oh my god! Let's make out!
So while this game is awesome and I would highly recommend it to anybody, you're probably wondering why it was a surprisingly successful game in the first place. Even though Psychonauts was critically acclaimed by anybody who reviewed it, the game sold horribly in its initial release, with less than 100,000 copies being sold in America. Thankfully, after Double Fine got the full rights to Psychonauts and re-released it, most notably on Steam, the game sold incredibly well. Which is good since they announced a sequel to the game a couple of years ago, which should be coming out next year. Or at least I hope it does. This waiting isn't good for my mental health. It's a mental joke. Just like with Super Mario RPG, people will probably be angry or confused as to why this is on the list, let alone at the top of it. I can answer both of those questions with another question. Can any of you tell me how many successful games were made where Luigi is the main character? The answer is none, and if any of you answered Mario is missing, shame on you. Speaking of Mario's missing, Luigi hasn't exactly had it to best when it comes to being the only main character in a game, because, literally, Mario is Missing was the first and only game that Luigi was the main character in it, and to be quite frank, it wasn't very good. Not to mention that Luigi's Mansion was a game intended to be a technological demo showcasing the GameCube's capabilities, but eventually, they just decided to make it into a full-fledged game. And while it didn't sell that great in Japan, only selling about 300,000 copies, in America it sold ridiculously well, selling well over 2 million copies and was the 5th best-selling GameCube game in the US. While this game lacks platforming of any kind, unless you call knocking and pulling on objects platforming, it does have an abundance of collectibles and ghosts for you to get, as well as some boss ghosts for you to catch and defeat. The spooky ghost in the neighborhood. Who you gonna call? Luigi!
Yeah!
And to defeat these ghosts, you have to use Luigi's weapon of choice, a vacuum cleaner, which is a fitting choice for a weapon considering they both suck. I'm just kidding, Luigi, I love you. I have to say though that my two favorite things about this game, other than collecting ghosts and goodies, is the way Luigi fat jogs around the building. And I know this is a fat jog because this is exactly what I look like when I jog. And the way he screams Mario if you press A anywhere.
Mario? Mario! Mario!
All in all, I think Luigi's Mansion is an awesome game because Luigi finally gets to be in the spotlight. Although the reason he's in the spotlight to begin with is because Mario's missing and he has to find him. Wait a minute! Hey, did you like the video? If you like what I do and want to see more of me, like and subscribe. Heck, even share it with your friends, every little bit helps. Did you have a game that you thought was awesome despite your first impressions that I didn't mention? Let me know in the comments below. And hopefully I will have another video out before too long, so I guess I'll see you then.